Okay. Okay. Welcome, everyone, once again to another session of The Doctors Are In, and we are beautifully, wonderfully excited to be here to serve you. And this particular program is hosted and sponsored by It Takes a Village in collaboration with Health Revival Partners and Sankofa Healing and Enrichment. The way this works, ladies and gents, is that we're here for you. So you can either unmute yourselves after you raise your hand and let me know that you want to ask a question, or you can feel free to type a question into the chat. And some people have already submitted questions that they've sent through the email. Any of those things are valid, but of course, we want to value those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to be with us here in person. You guys get first dibs when it comes to any questions that you would like to have addressed or any concerns that you would like to have addressed. So you can feel free to, as I said, either raise your hand or put your question into the chat, unmute yourself, whatever it is that you think is most conducive, okay? So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Yes, Dr. Huante. Awesome. We are always so fantastically blessed when we have Dr. Huante with us. She is coming to us from the beautiful land of Mexico. So she is fantabulous to be able to sync her schedule to be here with us tonight. Dr. Lewis said he's going to be running late. He's doing a lot of traveling right now, and so he will be joining us a little bit later into the program. Okay, so now, as I said, without further ado, feel free. Let me check the chat to see if there's anyone who has put a question in yet. No real questions yet. All righty. Okay. Oh, come on. Somebody has to have a question pertaining to something. So everyone here is fantabulous, has no health concerns, no anything. You are just like optimal health in every aspect of your life and nothing to ask. People are just so shy.
That's great. We're all healthy and happy and great.
I know, I tell you. Well, I am going to go ahead and put something into the realm of questions. So I know a lot of people have been dealing with joint issues. I know for myself in particular, I had challenge recently with my knees. You know, I was a cleanse, and in the cleanse, I decided that I was going to like ramp up my cleanse and do a lot of rebounding, right? Anybody here familiar with rebounding? Anybody raise a hand, or anybody has any experience with rebounding? Anyone? Okay, so a rebounder is like a little mini trampoline. And the beauty of being with a rebounder is that it helps to activate your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system is like the backup sewage system for the body. Now, unlike the colon, which takes like the big heavy stuff, you know, from your food, and it takes the waste matter from your food and deposits it out of the body, your lymphatic system is actually what surrounds all of the individual cells. And so when your cells have to take the trash out, your cells will release it from themselves into what we call interstitial fluids. This is the watery stuff that's around all of their cells. And so it'll dump it into the interstitial fluid that surrounds the cells. And then that is transmitted down into your lymph nodes. That is your lymphatic system. Now, the thing about the lymphatic system is that it doesn't have its own pump. Yeah, isn't that crazy? It doesn't have its own pumps. I think God has a sense of humor because God was like, look, I have to make sure that these lazy behind people get up and moving. So the way that he's going to inspire us to get up and moving is to make it a requirement. You know, you've got to be up and moving to activate the lymphatic system. So anyway, I decided that I was going to like supercharge my detox, right? And do a lot of rebounding. So Michelle did not do like 5 minutes of rebounding. No, Michelle said, oh, you know what? I'm going to really do this well. So I'm going to do like 20, 30 minutes of rebounding. Well, there's a reason why I tell all of my students to slow your roll, you know, but Michelle did not listen to her own advice. Michelle decided, oh, we're going to just throw this out of the park. So I was there rebounding for like 20, 30 minutes a day. And then around day 3, all hell broke loose. My knees got like puffed up like a blowfish, right? And it was so painful and stiff. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? So I'm going to open it up to you guys. And you guys tell me what I did. You guys tell me what I could have done differently. Come on. I know somebody here has thoughts. I'm going to allow you guys to be the doctor for me. Tell me what I should have done differently or tell me what I did. Tell me what was going on. Why did my knees swell up? Come on, you guys. I know you know the answers. I know you have some ideas. You guys are brilliant. Say something, anything, any thoughts, any ideas. Ah, Dreamer, any thoughts? No thoughts? No advice for crazy Michelle? Nobody has any advice for crazy Michelle?
Well, was it because that you hadn't cleared out the rest of the system and the lymphatic system starts with at the top and goes down? So you the gravity wasn't working correctly. And even though you were rebounding, so your calves were working, it wasn't going to where it needed to go back up to the kidneys to get or the bladder or whatever to get excreted. That's my guess.
Hmm, some good thoughts, some good ideas. So we have some ideas that the stuff, the waste matter, was not going where it needed to go. And so Deanna says that perhaps it wasn't going to the kidneys like it should need to go or somewhere else. Good thoughts, good thoughts. Any other ideas? Any other ideas?
Joel Peterson wrote in the chat that you didn't warm up.
Didn't warm up. Okay, that's an idea. That's an idea. Okay, interesting thoughts. Any other ideas? Any other ideas? So I'm taking time to pause because I'm going to move out the way. And you see it says community health clinic, which means we come together as a community. And when we say the doctors are in, I'm not just talking about those of us who are on the call who have like fancy labels in front of our names or behind our names. I truly believe that every single one of you is a doctor. Every single one of you has the power to drive and initiate your healing journey. Every single one of you has that divine wisdom that is inside of you. And so we're going to go with what Deanna said and combine that with what Joel said and kind of make sense of all of this, right? And I love, Deanna, that you're saying that you're new to this. And this is awesome because you're just like jumping in there. So that's fantastic. Someone said, not enough collagen from lack of meat. Okay, so that's another idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to first ask Dr. Huante to go ahead and jump in and tell me, what did I do wrong? Or what could I have done differently? I don't know.
Well, maybe you didn't warm up enough, because sometimes when we start doing exercise without warming up, it makes a like impact in our joints. That could be a reason. Or another reason is that if you weren't used to do any exercise and suddenly you started jumping and rebounding, it was too much exercise for that joint. So that like started swelling, and that swelling liberates some liquid from within the joint. And that's what happened. Maybe just a thought.
Awesome. I love all of these fantastic thoughts. So we'll first talk about that idea of not enough warming up. And in this case, I did warm up. So it wasn't so much about the warm up, but we're going to combine what Deanna said with what Dr. Huante said. And it was a combination of those two things, meaning that I had not been in the habit of rebounding. And then I decided Michelle wasn't even going to start with 5 minutes. Michelle wanted to be Miss Super Athlete and go start with like 20 minutes and 30 minutes. In combination with the fact that at that point in time, I was doing a deep detox. And so what happens when you are doing a deep detox, you're already in the process of releasing all kinds of toxicity, right? And what I've found sometimes when people are going through a cleanse and they start to do like too much at one time, it's called overwhelm. And there's like a backup in the system. So this ties into what Deanna said, which is that the waste matter was not going where it needed to go as efficiently as it needed to be because I was ramping up too much too fast. So usually that fluid, as Dr. Huante was saying, one of the lymphatic centers is right there behind the knees, right? And as you're rebounding, you're activating it and things are like flushing into that zone. But if you're trying to detox too quickly, you may overwhelm the system and the system's like, whoa, there's a backup here. There's a backup here, right? And so that is what happened. So now, given those ideas.
Dr. Michelle.
Yes, sir.
What about rebounding backwards?
I'm not really even sure how I would rebound backwards.
I know that, but I was just referring to that video you sent me about walking backwards to create
walking backwards,
more balance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now Dr. Lewis is actually jump starting us into the next direction. So it's like, okay, now that we have quote unquote analyzed the situation and we figured out what Michelle did wrong, all righty? Now I'm going to throw it to you guys. You guys are the health detectives. You guys are the doctors in the house. What could Michelle do at that point to reverse what had happened and to facilitate a more effective healing journey? What are some ideas? What are some ideas? Come on, you guys. I know you've got some ideas. Don't be shy. Just throw it out into the chat or, ha, we got it right there. Stop the exercise. Good thought. Stop doing what's causing the problem in the first place. a lot of times we don't want to do that. You know, we know that eating the Mickey D's is causing all kinds of stuff to happen to us. We know that some of these habits are triggering dis-ease, promoting dis-ease, but we don't even want to stop it. And so sometimes it's as simple as stop doing what you're doing. So kudos to you guys who said it. And then we had the other idea, massage. God, you guys are so brilliant. See, what you don't need me. You don't need Dr. Huante. You guys could figure all of this stuff out by yourself. So yes, those are two things that I actually started to do. I stopped doing the rebounding because I had to remember that I was in the middle of a deep cleanse. And so maybe that was not the smart time to start doing all of this rebounding at one time, you know? So I stopped doing the excessive rebounding of like 20, 30 minutes, right? And then I started to massage the area, because massage is another way to facilitate the movement of the lymphatic system. And I use what's called copaiba essential oil to help to cut down on the pain and the inflammation. So those are some of the things that I did, and voila, my knees returned to normal, the pain dissipated, and I finished up my cleanse, and now I'm starting my rebounding again, but I'm taking it slowly, you know? So I'm starting out with like 5 minutes, and I see Dr. Huante nodding her head like, yeah, Michelle, you know? Yeah, slowly but surely wins the race. That's what I want to encourage you guys. A lot of times when I'm working with people, you're so excited about transforming your health, and you try to do so many things at one time. But guys, take it slowly, because we want you to have a sustainable journey. We don't want you to be overwhelmed and then all of a sudden you just crash, right? You crash and burn. So I always encourage people to think of 1 or 2 little habits that you can change at a time, 1 or 2 little things. And even when you change 1 or 2 little things, like I was talking to one of my students today, and we said, you know what? We want to ramp up to the point where we're drinking 70 ounces of water a day. But I said, don't start that at one time. You know, we're going to start slowly. I had one time I had a student, we literally had to start with a tablespoon of water a day, because this is a woman who never, ever drank water. And she actually had like an aversion to water. So I wasn't going to overwhelm her and say, well, now you've got to drink 70 ounces of water or whatever. No, take it slowly. Because, you know, if you start off with just 1 glass of water, and then when that becomes comfortable, guess what? You're going to start to activate something inside of you. And then you're going to say, man, I'm thirsty. 1 glass of water isn't enough. And then before you know it, you're going to have the urge to drink 2 glasses of water, and then 3 glasses of water. And before you know it, you're going to be up to 70 ounces or wherever it is that you need to be. So slowly but surely wins the race. So in any case, someone said here, yep, so quickly ramped up, the inflammation was too much to clear. Exactly. And my joints, my knees are my weak spot. So a lot of times in a cleanse, you will find that there's what's called Hering's Law of Cures. So as you start to reverse the disease process, old areas that haven't been sufficiently healed will flare up again. Things that you forgot about, as you start to go back in time to start to do that repair and do that work. And it happens not only physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You know, you're going to find that during a cleanse, sometimes old emotional paradigms that you thought you thought that you had done the work and it was dead and buried. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this stuff comes up and it's like, whoa, you know, I thought I had already finished with this stuff. And spirit says, nope, you haven't finished. And it brings it back up to the surface for you to finish doing the work, for you to complete the healing. So you guys are brilliant. Awesome, awesome, brilliant.
So Dr. Michelle,
Huante,
Dr. Michelle, can I add 2 cents here?
just a second. Dr. Huante was going to say
I'm
something
so
first.
sorry. Okay, I'm on my
Yeah,
phone. Yeah.
so I'm sorry. I just want to add to that. I always explain to my students, it's like if we are onions. So we take out the like the external part of the onion, but underneath maybe it's a little bit of disease that remained. It's like the energy of the disease that remained there. That's why sometimes we have to heal over and over on the same theme, whether if it's physical or emotional, because it remains underneath.
Yeah. Awesome. Fantastic. That is so true. Dr. Lewis, what you got?
Well, based on that video you sent me for Eric Berg, and he had that athletic trainer on that talked about walking backwards to sort of balance off all the fact that we go forward. My daughter sent me the best present I've ever had in terms of stretching and health and avoiding injury. And it's like a 4 or 5 or 6 inch diameter hard foam roll. And it took me a long time to be able to, like, you just kind of roll on that, my hamstrings, my front, my back, but doing all sides of the muscles. And when I first started with this, I could barely touch my ankles, and now I'm pretty regular with just a little stretching to be able to hit the palm on the floor.
Awesome.
Yeah,
You know,
and
that is like
that thing costs like $10.
And that is a fantastic thing for everyone to consider integrating into your health and healing plan, using those rollers, because not only are you stimulating and facilitating the lymphatic movement,
exactly,
but you're also working on what we learned. Some of you are a part of Dr. Lewis's group, and you will recall a couple episodes back, we had someone who was talking about the fascia. You guys remember that?
Hal Blattman.
Yeah, and so when you utilize the roller, not only
Exactly.
are you stimulating the lymphatic system, but you're also gently massaging that fascia, and loosening up a lot of the, I guess you can say, almost ligature that is binding things and causing restriction and can lead to pain and inflammation. So fantastic, you guys. You did a phenomenal job of helping to delve in and solve the puzzle of what made Dr. Gamble's knees go poof and hurt like crazy. So y'all are awesome. So now we have a question here. And the question is, what can you do with regards to prostatitis and BPH, which is benign prostate hypertrophy? Any effective strategies or supplements? So I'm going to throw that to Dr. Huante and Dr. Lewis first, and then I will give my little 2 cents later. Anybody wants to jump in with that one?
I'll let Dr. Quantes go first.
Okay.
Can you just repeat the question, because I didn't listen completely?
Okay, no problem. We have prostatitis and BPH, which is benign prostate hypertrophy. And what are some effective strategies or supplements that can be used with that situation? So the jewels for men, the goodies for men.
Yes. Well, I'm only thinking on homeopathy, but on supplements, I know there's a plant, cat's claw, I think it's called. In Spanish, it's uña de gato, so I think it's cat's claw. And it's used for that, for prostate problems.
Awesome. What about homeopathy?
Well, of course, in homeopathy, there are different remedies that could help this person, but we need to know the exact same symptoms. There's not one remedy for this disease. No, we have to check exactly the symptoms. If the symptoms are in the morning or when urinating or at night or with whatever. So it has to be like very specific, so we can give the specific remedy for that person, not for the disease, but for what that person needs.
Okay. And we have Maura from our community saying beetroot. Awesome, awesome. Now, Maura, if you want to jump in and tell us why beetroot, because that's an awesome idea, but I want you to share with us why beetroot. Do you know why beetroot would be effective in helping?
No, I have no idea. My husband takes it. That's all I know.
That's good. That's good. So one of the things that you'll find in beetroot is what we refer to as nitric oxide. And so that will help to facilitate blood flow to the area. So, you know, it's used a lot also with like cardiovascular disease. And guess what? A lot of times when we're dealing with men's issues like erectile dysfunction, we're really and truly talking about a cardiovascular disease issue where you have the vessels that need to be supported. Sometimes there are blockages. And so a lot of times when I work with men who are dealing with ED, I tell them, look, your ED is like the small potatoes in comparison to what the bigger issue is, you know, because they're like, well, Michelle, you know, I'll just take a pill for it. And I'm like, okay, look, let me tell you something. You keep on taking those pills and not address the real issue, and you be dead with your stuff sticking up. Now, hey, if that works for you, no problem. But if you want to actually improve your health and well-being so that you can enjoy your sex life and at the same time lower your risk of being 6 feet under, then start to deal with the underlying issues of cardiovascular disease. A lot of times you'll have either arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis, where you have either a blockage that is starting to build up within your small capillaries that are going and feeding that part of your body. And or you can have the hardening of the vessels, the constriction of the vessels, so that you're not able to get proper blood flow to that area. Well, in any case, how does this relate to the prostatitis? So anything that ends in itis, you're talking about inflammation, right? And a lot of times when we're dealing with men who have that type of issue, the first thing I say to them is, it is cleansing time. You need to do a nice deep cleanse and to really emphasize things like your kidneys and things like your lymphatic system. Also looking at supportive herbs like saw palmetto is good. Also remembering your zinc is good. And then also looking at the mental, emotional, spiritual aspect of this particular issue. So this is where we're looking at a lot of men are dealing with a fear of losing their manhood. And anytime you are dealing with fear, fear leads to a chronic release of cortisol. Fear leads to or feeds inflammation. Fear leads to the possibility of creating aberrant cell multiplication. Let's just put it that way, right? And so it's very important to address whatever it is that is triggering your fear, or whatever it is that is triggering that sense of losing your manhood. It may be that you may be in a relationship where you do not feel supported. You do not feel your manhood is being supported. And so you start to go down that particular track where it's like, oh my God, I'm losing my ability to assert myself as a man. I'm losing my ability to stand firm and to have that virility, right? So a lot of different things can interplay when we're talking about BPH or prostatitis or even prostate cancer. Whenever we're dealing with the gonads, always look at the mental, emotional, spiritual aspect of health and healing, and not simply limit yourself to thinking about the physical area. So we have a question from Tyrone. Go ahead, Tyrone, you can ask your question.
So when do you start figuring in age? Isn't it natural for what now? Hiccups in that area to increase as one gets older? And at what age? How do you judge the age at which it's not normal and you should seek to correct or reverse it?
I think a lot of things in our society we have been taught to normalize. We've been taught to normalize the downward slope of our vitality. Now, I'm not saying that as we grow older, that we're going to have the same sexual vitality as, say, an 18-year-old. I will say, however, that to believe that we should not have sexual vitality at an older age is to fall prey to the normalization of illness in our society. Why do I say that? I say that because, and I'm going to come from a more spiritual background, a more biblical background in some respect, where some of you can relate to stories in the Bible, stories in other sacred texts of very old people who have significant vitality and continue to produce children. And they are not living in the age of Viagra. They didn't have Viagra hundreds of years ago. So the question is, how did these people who were, historically speaking, seniors, able to continue having babies? Because vitality is still within our grasp. But the question becomes, are we going to choose to stop doing the things that lead to the inflammation, that lead to the degradation of our systems? Are we going to choose to revitalize our systems? Or are we just going to say, it's just a matter of getting older? I would challenge that whole proposition, because we keep on saying all kinds of things are just because we're getting older. Like, oh, I can't remember my name. It's just because I'm getting older. I don't buy that. But Dr. Huante, what are your thoughts?
Well, it depends on your belief system, of course. So if you think that when you get to 60, 70, 80, or whatever age you put on your brain, that will stop you from doing certain things, or that will make you feel sicker or sick, or that will make you, I don't know, not able to walk or to do certain activities, well, then you're giving an instruction not just to your brain, but to your whole body to stop doing whatever you could do. And then from one day to the other, you're a senior, or you're a senile, or an old person who cannot do certain things. But it's in your belief system. And if you tell yourself you're old, well, that will happen. But if you tell yourselves and yourself that I'm strong, and I'm healthy, I'm fit, I have a great metabolism, I have a super digestive system, and whatever you tell to your body, that is going to happen in your body, because you're giving the instruction to yourselves. So it goes beyond what society tells us, or what religion tells us, or what our family, or what even our genes history tells us. It's what we tell ourselves and our body.
And along with that, I am always inspired when I talk to Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis just fascinates me, because this man is so super vital and athletic. And I'm just like, man, I can't do not even 10% of the stuff that he does. This man bikes like you would not believe it. You would think that he was an 18-year-old, the kind of stuff that he does. So I'm going to pass the baton to you, Dr. Lewis. Inspire our people.
I think instead of inspiring right now, I just got off a 3-hour ride, and I met a young Frenchman on the group ride tonight who was getting his doctorate at Carson Newman University in my town, but he's a real Frenchman. I barely understand his French, but we were talking old time cycling. But I'm just going to tell you a story about a 73-year-old Nelson Rockefeller. Does anybody know the story about how Nelson Rockefeller died at the age of 73? He was having intercourse and he had a heart attack.
That is not inspiring. That's not helping our cause, Dr. Lewis.
But I'm sorry about that. But this is a story about, he was 73 and still very sexually active. So I don't think it goes away. It's more. I completely agree with you. It's a mental attitude, and we were having the conversation with this young Frenchman. He was like 30 years old, and there were four of us on a 3-hour ride tonight, and he said that there's no shortcut. You have to put in the effort, but what you really have to do is, I'm very fortunate. I found something that brings me complete joy. But what I realized is it's not about the effort and the joy. We live in kind of a toxic world. And when I go out and do my exercise, I actually leave this world and go into a very meditative state. And I don't think you can do that if you're doing something you dislike. So I think it's really critical to explore different options and get involved with groups to help motivate you, because that's what I do. I ride singly once or twice a week, but I ride with groups like 3 or 4 times a week. And it's very motivating, and people will share stories and experiences and help one another. Dr. Michelle, have you ever heard the concept of community? I'm just kidding you, of course, but I think we need that in physical activity as well. I think people going to the gym solo without a group, and they take on a New Year's pledge, but it's once again just them in isolation trying to take on an endeavor that they may not be that excited about, and that's the biggest thing. So you have to find passion. I can tell you, I've had some of my best thoughts, and I remember exactly where I was on my bike in the beautiful countryside in a meditative state. And so, really, you got to find your passion. Think, I'm doing the same thing I did when I was the first kid in my neighborhood. I was in 5th grade, got a 10-speed bike. So I found something very young I enjoyed. And like a lot of people look at me and said, shouldn't you have outgrown riding a bicycle? I'm saying, well, what you're saying to me is, shouldn't I become an old fart? I want to be youthful. And so I just do what I did. I do what I loved doing when I was a kid.
Tyrone, you had something else to add?
Just a quick one for Dr. Lewis. Isn't there any anxiety? It seems like you are a very serious biker, and I've heard of some conflict between the bicycle seat and the prostate.
Actually,
anxiety there.
Actually, I think there's no real scientific data on that correlation. I mean, it may be with some people that, just their position is wrong, or they had a hard strike or something like that. But we now realize that blood flow restriction actually upregulates new vessel formation, actually increases blood flow. So, for example, Dr. Carter had on our webinar series the Katsu, and there are other systems like that where you actually squeeze the tissue to constrict blood flow to certain areas of the body, and that part of the body goes hypoxic, and your brain responds in kind to not let that tissue die of oxygen starvation, and upregulates what's called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. So I think in many cases, blood flow restriction, like is suspected on a bicycle seat, can have just the opposite effect. Now, can you find anecdotal cases where the opposite is true? Obviously, you know, it's all statistics, but in general, stimulating a hypoxic environment usually causes the body to respond and compensate for that problem.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Now we have a question here about dry eye syndrome. And a lot of people, oh, this is rather interesting. I found a lot of people who have been coming within my sphere that are dealing with dry eyes. So I'm going to once again open it up and ask for Dr. Huante and Dr. Lewis to jump in and share what they want to share.
Yeah, I have also seen a lot of dry eye syndrome here in Mexico. I thought it was the pollution because Mexico City is quite polluted, but now it's interesting that it's everywhere, this syndrome. Of course, there are different remedies, but one of the main remedies in homeopathy is bryonia for the dryness. Their dryness in our mouth, in our eyes, in whatever. So it's one of the best options for you to use for your eyes. You could use it orally, or there are drops of bryonia and eye drops. So that's also useful.
I didn't even know that they had it as eye drops. Is there a particular company?
There's one brand. There's one brand. It's Highlands, and they have it in eye drops. Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Oh, Dr. Lewis?
Well, you know, we look at kind of the mouth and the eyes as like separate from the rest of the body. And we talk about, you know, blood detox, and we talk about gut detox. We need to do eye detox as well. And really what you're talking about is a drainage issue. You're dry eye because you're not producing the tears, or you're not draining fluids, so the tears aren't being formed. And so we got to look at a detox, and it starts with the whole body as usual, because the eye is part of the body. In fact, the eye has the highest blood flow on a per mass basis than any other tissue, even more than the brain and the kidneys. So the first thing I do is look at things like Demodex, which are mites and other pathogens that can cause inflammation. And the cord under the retina, that's the blood vessel bank that supports the retina, which is your photographic plate, which is the most energy dense piece of tissue in your body. So you have very high density. And so looking at blood flow, looking at inflammation in the blood, looking at the erythrocyte sedimentation rate. But that's more measurement. So what do I do? I'll do iodine eye drops. You can do other eye drops. Regenerize is a stem cell that's been shown to improve dry eye. But the other thing you can do at home, there's nothing better for the skin than castor oil. Take it internally and put it on externally. And if you really want to get rid of these little infectious things that are clogging pores and causing a lack of drainage, you take some castor oil and a little teeny bit of tea tree oil, which these Demodex mites can't stand, and do it very carefully, titrate it up from very low dose. But if you put pure castor oil on your eyebrows and around your eyes and eyelids, you'll have absolutely no inflammation, no irritation. And that's actually very effective against some of these things that can cause dry eye. But once again, tea tree oil, and I sometimes will very carefully put a small amount of tea tree oil just on my eyebrows, and you can feel it coming down and sort of irritating the area. But the little organisms, you can look it up on Google, look up in Google Images, Demodex. They're nasty little things, but they cause crusty eye, red eye, and dry eye.
All right. Now, the other thing to consider with dry eye is something that may seem kind of obvious, but we don't think about, which is a lot of us spend a lot of time indoors with central AC or central heating systems, and your ACs and your heating system significantly dry out the air in your environment. So one of the things that you may want to consider is utilizing a humidifier. If you find that your ambient environment, meaning the environment in your home, is very dry. So if you're using, like I said, AC system and or a heating system that's drying out the air and making the humidity of the air very, very low, you may want to supplement that with a humidifier. And in that humidifier, you can put in something like tea tree oil, to be able to purify the air. So that's one thing. And then going again to what Dr. Huante and Dr. Lewis were saying in terms of unblocking, detoxifying the ducts that produce the tears for the eye, the lubrication for the eye. One of the things that you can use is like getting a chamomile tea bag, making the tea, soaking it warm, and just laying it over the eyes to use it to not only cut down on the inflammation, but also to help to clear the eyes. And also Dr. Schultz, Dr. Richard Schultz, you go to HerbDoc, HerbDoc.com. He has a tincture, a remedy called Eye Bright, and that helps, like what Dr. Lewis was saying, to kill any bacteria and viruses and things of that nature that are in the eye and to help the eye to cleanse more effectively. So those are some of the things that you can utilize in terms of helping with the clearing of the eye ducts and the humidify or adding the moisture to the eyes. All righty. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Okay. Oh, there's one question coming up. Okay. So we had some questions that came in over the email. And this question was, the person has Dr. McCullough's H2 tablets and the activated oxygen drops, and wants to know if they can put both in their water, and can they take supplements with water that will either affect the strength of these particulars. So I'm going to throw that to Dr. Lewis.
Oh dear. What was it? Some oxygen water? Michelle,
Dr. McCullough's H2 tablets and activated oxygen drops. They want to know if they can put both of them in water and take supplements with the water, or will it be affected?
I always go back to nature. I mean, see, Dr. McCullough produces 3 to 5 pieces of content every day. And so what's the priority? Today you have 5 new things. Tomorrow you have 5 new things. So I always titrate, and Dr. Michelle, you taught me this too. Go back to nature. I mean, hydrogen is a nice redox substance. Keep it simple. But in nature, have we adapted over history taking in hydrogen? No. So like hydrogen is really nothing special about it other than, it can form a redox couple. So it can donate an electron, it can take an electron. And that's pretty much everything in our world when we get very fundamental. But I look at fish oil as doing the exact same thing. It's kind of like if you look at a steel nail and it's been outside on the, on your clapboards, and you see this little line of rust coming down, it's rusting away. But if you put a little zinc on that nail, the zinc takes the hit, the steel, the iron, and the iron doesn't rust. So there are almost every chemical under God's green earth has a potential to either donate electrons or take electrons away. There's nothing really special about hydrogen, in my opinion. And I think it provides very little value other than as an antioxidant. But you look at something like fish oil, cod liver oil, it's an antioxidant, but it's also a cell membrane builder. It's a brain electrical conductor builder, all these other things. So some of these things that aren't natural, in my opinion, are going to become fads. I see no problem with
Yeah.
mixing them because, you know, that they'll, you know, it's all about the chemistry, and I don't think you'll see any kind of reaction between those two. But, you know, if it's not in nature and it's not something that we've adapted to over a long period of time, then we really don't have the processes to take full benefit of it.
Yeah.
Hopefully it
And, you
makes
know,
some sense while not answering your question.
No, I love what you're saying, and I think you bring up a very important point that, you know, there just like so many 50 million different fads and things that are out there. And I think that the danger of where we're going right now in quote unquote the natural space, which is not natural at all, is this reductionist attitude where we think that we're going to isolate a particular element or isolate a particular compound and, you know, ramp it up and think that that is going to be a cure-all, as opposed to recognizing that nature places everything in a context. And when you take things out of context, you're really minimizing the beautiful bounty that is available. So that is why, you know, your cod liver oil is much more effective, as far as I can see, than trying to isolate, say, some laboratory version of vitamin D. Your cod liver
Let me
oil
give you
has
an example, Dr.
been
Michelle.
synthesized by nature. Go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
Let me give you an example. If you want to live 9
Mhm.
years longer than your neighbor, just do what the Japanese do. They live 9 years old, 9 years longer than Americans. They eat sea vegetables. They have their miso soup. They have warm, you know, high nutrient density foods. They don't drink the number one beverage out of a vending machine in Japan is green tea. You know, look at that culture. So they eat the bounty of the sea. And I know there was a great documentary about don't eat the bounty of the sea because it's one of the most polluting of all industries. But, you know, if you're trying to achieve longevity, you look at what the Japanese do. And then you look at the Koreans. They're seeing the greatest increase in longevity of any nation. And what they do is they eat the greatest variety of fermented foods. And then you look at the Asian Indians. They have more middle class than any other civilization. And they eat high levels of spice, which are very high in micro and phytonutrients, natural substances, very high in nutrient density. You know, it's not about the sugar, it's about the lack of nutrient density is taken in a high sugar diet, because the micronutrients are what repair you. You want to always keep your repair ahead of your deterioration. So hydrogen presumably will oxidize rather than your tissue. But there's a zillion molecules, natural molecules, that'll oxidize for you rather than having your tissue oxidize.
Mhm. Awesome. Dr. Huante, what would you like to add?
Well, of course, nature always gives us what we need. So I will always prefer the natural option, like you were saying, from fruits, veggies, legumes, from the food, instead of taking a pill that will have that, but it doesn't act the same way in our body as the natural source. So always go for the natural.
You know, I always ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish by taking a particular supplement? You know, so for I find a lot of times people are taking supplements as anti-inflammatories. Okay, I understand that, especially if you're in pain. However, the other thing is to go back to one of the first things that someone said in the chat today, which is to stop doing what's causing the inflammation in the first place. Okay. And how many times have you gone to a doctor where you're complaining of inflammation in your joints or your hips or whatever it is, and the doctor says, let me do an investigation to find out what is triggering the inflammation in the first place, and let us deal with that. No, they don't tell you that. All they want to do is give you cortisone shots or something of that nature. And in reality, guess what? Mother Nature is inflaming you for a reason. Mother Nature is inflaming you to tell you, hey, Michelle, it's insane that you're there doing your rebounder for 20, 30 minutes while you're in the middle of a deep cleanse. Stop doing what you're doing, chickadee. Okay? And start doing the things that are promote healing. And I will always contend that nature promotes healing. Everything else is a vitamin, is a Band-Aid. So if you are focusing, really optimize, look at the different things that you can do with your food and your lifestyle to promote the healing and to stop the disease process. So I'm going to let Dr. Lewis and Dr. Huante give their parting words of wisdom. You guys,
Well,
who wants to jump in first?
I have to take this one on first. We'll let Dr. Quantes conclude for us. But I wrote 3 blogs about 10 years ago, and the title was "Don't Take Antioxidant Supplements." And people would think that's very controversial, but 10 years later, it stood the test of time. And Dr. Michelle, what you talked about is nutrients that repair are much better than some of these other classes. Repairing is very important. Antioxidants, the problem, and this, David Sinclair, I'm not a big fan of him, but a lot of people know him, and he's a Harvard guy, so he carries a big pedigree. But he was involved with the sirtuins and the resveratrol, modified resveratrol. They never could reproduce that data. They sold the company to GlaxoSmithKline with knowing that the data was falsified for $728 million. I was in Boston at the time. But the point is, even Sinclair says that antioxidants is not necessarily providing the results that people think in anti-aging. And let me just explain why. Natural antioxidants are in balance, like Dr. Michelle says, not reductionism, whole foods. One of the major things that keeps us alive are white blood cells and antibodies, both of which carry out oxidative processes. Our body knows when to do antioxidation, and it knows when to do oxidation, okay? And when we try to overwhelm it, like if you drink too much water without minerals, you will die, okay? Too much of a good thing is bad. So I'm really against a lot of these one-off so-called antioxidants to save your tissue. Our body's doing that for us all the time. And when it needs to oxidize to kill something, we're not stymieing it because, you know, our body, all those systems work together in unison. That's my parting comment.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Huante?
Well, I would just end with what you started with. We all have the answer within ourselves. We have to use our intuition. So we have to ask ourselves, do I really need to take this supplement, this antioxidant, this whatever? Or can I have a good diet, a good nutrition to have all what my body needs? So we always have the answer, but we don't want to listen to our intuition.
That's brilliant.
Absolutely. I will resonate with that by saying, I encourage us to look deep within ourselves and exorcise the sins in our lives where we are simply ignoring nature's supremacy. A lot of times we are trying to swim upstream. We're trying to undo natural patterns of nature. And we want to do that without any kind of casualty or impunity. And at some point in time, nature says, you know what? You can only get away with so much. And then you're going to have to pay the price. So I encourage all of us to really look within, like Dr. Huante says, because you know the answer. When my knee swelled up, all I had to do was sit down for a moment, go inward, meditate, and I was like, yeah, I know what's going on here. But as Dr. Huante said, sometimes we don't want to hear the answer. And so we're like, nah, 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 nah. I'm just going to take this pill and this pill and this pill and this supplement and this supplement so that I can continue doing whatever the heck I want to do, even though I know that that's really what I need to address. You are the new doctor in town. You were divinely designed to heal yourself. You have the wisdom and intuition to reverse all forms of dis-ease. With that, my lovely ladies and gents, I leave you in the spirit of peace and blessings, and I look forward to seeing you guys next month. God bless.